Hello, you gorgeous individuals, it's Kav here and welcome to my Draw My Life video. Now I am by no means a talented artist, but I wanted to do this video as a way to come back from my hiatus and just to celebrate my birthday weekend, honestly. So without further ado, let's just get started. So I was born on September 2nd, 2001 in the Bay Area of California. And I was born to a family of 3 people. My mom, my dad, and my older sister who was 6 years old at the time. So I really have no memories of my young childhood, but what I do know is that most people say that I was very imaginative and creative. One of the most common stories that gets told to me is that when I was 3 years old, I apparently was dancing in a road with a bunch of necklaces around my neck, and that probably honestly wasn't very safe, but did 3-year-old me really know any better? No. Another huge part of my childhood was that I built a lot of imaginary families and I made people play a lot of imaginary games with me. I went through a lot of marriages while I was growing up. So when I was 4 years old, my dad actually got transferred to India for his job. So I lived in India for 2 years of my life, specifically Bangalore, if any of you know anything about India. And because I was so young, I honestly don't have many specific memories of my time there. I was there when I was 5 and 6, and I experienced kindergarten and first grade there. But what I do know is my experiences there were the first times I really had a best friend. Unfortunately, she's not around anymore. I returned to California just before I turned 7, and I attended 2nd through 5th grade at the same elementary school my sister went to. Unfortunately, those years were actually not that easy for me. I had a lot of trouble making friends as a kid. I thought that it was because I was introverted, but I'm actually an extrovert. I just had really bad social anxiety and didn't know it at the time. Despite the fact that I struggled with making friends, I was actually involved in a lot of activities. I have done singing for over half my life and I completely adore it. I did dance and I have done a lot of dance styles throughout my childhood. I did ice skating for a good 3 or 4 years of my childhood. And I was also in Girl Scouts, which was probably the worst of these experiences, unfortunately, and I did a ton of summer camps. 2 of the most memorable were fashion camp, and I still actually use the bag I made during fashion camp, and marine biology camp because my mom always had a dream that one of her children would be a marine biologist. Like I said, those years were honestly very hard for me because I had little to no friends for most of them, but there were 2 outside things that happened during that time. One thing was that around the time when I was 8, I actually moved into a new house. It was very close to my old one, but it was a change to a much bigger house. Then, roughly a year after we moved into our new house, we actually got our dog, who is all over my social media all the time. His name is Apollo, like Greek mythology, like the sun god. Then at 9 years old, when I was in 4th grade, I was recruited into the group of the popular kids at my school, and you can imagine how ecstatic elementary school me was. How we managed to have a social hierarchy in a grade of 24 students still baffles me to this day, but 9-year-old me was just so happy to think that they had finally found some friends. Little did I know how absolutely toxic that girl who recruited me would be. She was so absolutely controlling and she was so manipulative in the most subtle ways, and honestly, I would even go as far as to say that she bordered on being emotionally abusive at times. And it was just the worst experience. She was the type of person who would pretend to be your best friend to your face, but tear you down when you weren't around. And her calling me fat is what led to the eating issues and body image issues and weight issues I still struggle with to this very day. I would spend most nights crying myself to sleep because I couldn't even recognize the person who I was in the mirror. I would ask, who am I? Because I hated the person I had become. And when we finally came forward with what she had done with us, when we finally realized, she essentially blamed all of the behavior on the one girl who wasn't there. And she had most of the students and all of the teachers wrapped around her little finger, so she never got held accountable for her treatment of us. Though my school was a K-8 school, I actually did transfer for middle school because there was some weird stuff that happened with my elementary school. We essentially had 5th grade in the back of a church, and all of us just generally dispersed for middle school. So I was so happy to think I was getting away from this toxicity, but little did I know that that very same girl would be coming to middle school with me. And 6th grade really wasn't all that memorable for me. It was just one of those bad years, but 7th grade was when things started to go really wrong. So, though there were a lot, and I mean a lot of bad things about my 7th grade experience, one amazing thing was that that was the year me and my best friend became best friends. We had gone to the same elementary school but were never close, but then we bonded 7th and 8th grade over our mutual hatred of this school, and I'm so glad to still call him one of my closest friends to this day because he was my rock that year. But the unfortunate part was that I was still not free from that toxic, manipulative, horrible person in my life, and she and her control was still there during my 7th grade experience. One of my specific memories is that there was a rumor that went around that I was a lesbian, and I mean, joke's on them because I am one, but that caused me to repress my sexuality so much that I didn't truly accept it until I was 16. And outside of that, I also truly believed that one of the teachers I had was racist, and I didn't think of it at the time. She was just kind of mean, but her behavior was really microaggressive. But on an even sadder note, 7th grade was the first time I ever experienced suicidal thoughts. And keep in mind that I was 12 and I wanted to end my life, which honestly still breaks my heart to this day. 8th grade was honestly kind of just more of the same of that experience, so I don't feel the need to rehash it, so let's just move on to high school. So by this point I had graduated 8th grade and was gearing up for my very first year of high school, and I was super duper excited for this summer because I thought that I would be able to leave behind all of the toxicity of my previous middle school and elementary school experiences, but this was by far the absolute worst summer of my life. So during the summer of 8th to 9th grade, I was actually in summer school for 2 different courses. I was in summer school for computers because I wanted to get that semester out of the way and not have to deal with it during the school year. And then I was also in summer school to further my math knowledge, so I was taking an algebra course over the summer. This means that I was at my school for 6 hours a day, plus probably a huge amount of homework because we were trying to complete 2 semesters worth of work in 3 weeks. And this combined with my deteriorating mental health was not a good combination. That summer was so traumatic for me. I was basically having a panic attack a day. I would just sob while doing my homework, and I was experiencing such severe suicidal thoughts that they actually drove me to self-harm for the very first time, but definitely not the last. So during this unbearable dark period of my life, there were 2 specific people who were so helpful. The first one was my sister, who basically sat with me as I cried every night and made me her first priority that entire summer. And the second was my cousin, who I really only started talking to in detail for the first time that summer, but he is one of my closest friends to this day, and he was so helpful in me battling my depression journey. So my sister was actually also the first person to tell me and my parents that I needed professional help, and she was the one who pushed us to get me a therapist and to get me a psychiatrist, and without her I probably wouldn't have started that journey. So at the beginning of 9th grade, I actually did get a therapist for the first time, and I saw my therapist for I think about 3 years or maybe even over that, and she was very helpful, but 9th grade and the start of this journey, I was still struggling a lot. So honestly, 9th grade was just a very bad year, and that's just how I remember it. It was just everything was clouded by my depression and my anxiety and all of the bad and dark thoughts I was having. So, second semester of 9th grade, she actually recommended that I get a psychiatrist, and we agreed that I might need additional help. So I got a psychiatrist who I still see to this day because I am still on medication for my depression and anxiety, and he is the one who has prescribed me that medication. And it took him a long time to do it because he wanted to get through every other option, and I was actually the one who asked for meds first, but he is such a brilliant psychiatrist and he went through every other option before we came to meds. Those of you who have been here for a long time might actually remember my second semester of 9th grade as something else, because it was the time I started YouTube. And fun fact, I actually had a singing channel before my booktube channel, but that got shut down due to my depression. Regardless, I am very, very happy with my booktube channel because books are my first love, and I also learned that I could make online friends, and I've made so many of my best friends through the booktube and book blogging community, so it was just a highlight in all this darkness. And a few huge things actually happened during the summer of 9th to 10th grade, at least a few good things did. The first thing was that I got a camera for my YouTube channel, which was huge because YouTube is such a huge part of my life and it is my thing, so getting something to devote all my time and energy to was great. And we also got a cat whose name is Artemis, like the moon goddess, who's Apollo's sibling, and that was huge because I begged and begged my parents for a cat. So you'd think I would have been happy, but in reality I wasn't. And then in August, late August, just after I started my sophomore year of high school, a week before my 15th birthday, came the single worst experience of my life. I tried to kill myself. So obviously at that point I knew something was wrong and I wanted to get better, so I told my therapist what happened, and by law she is required to tell my parents if something like that happens. So she is the one who told my family, and the worst thing of the whole experience was seeing the look on my dad's face because I was in the room when he found out, and it was just the hardest thing for our family to deal with. After a lot of discussion, we collectively decided as a group that the best decision would be to send me to an IOP program, which is an intensive outpatient program. And this was by far the most important 2 months of my life, where I was there 3 hours a day, 4 days a week, getting the tools I needed to help myself, because whereas they did provide therapy, they were there to help me decide what I needed to do with my meds or decide if I needed to increase it with a psychiatrist and such. What they were really doing was giving us the tools to help ourselves if things like this happen again, and giving us tools to deal with our depression and anxiety and whatever we were going with on our own. And another huge thing is that I stopped isolating myself as much. I started creating friends, and it was hard. I fell back into old and bad habits often, but I slowly started getting much better, and I did increase my meds. I did see a therapist while I was there, but the tools were probably the most important part. So then 2017 was actually one of the best years of my life, and possibly even the best year of my life. I was in my first ever romantic relationship that year because I felt like I could be, and I was creating friends. I have so many new friends now, and I had YouTube, which was such a huge thing for me to devote time to, and I was finally getting healthy, which has been such a long journey for me, and I just came out so much happier and stronger out of IOP. So 2 of my most memorable experiences from 2017 was one, attending Y'all West, which was my first ever book convention, and it was so much fun and so busy. And I also went to Harry Potter Land in LA for my birthday, which was the first time I celebrated my birthday in 3 years. So both of those were huge, amazing experiences of mine. And then 2018 rolled around, and unfortunately it was nowhere near as good as 2017. I relapsed bad with my depression for the first 6 months of the year, and I was struggling, and I fell back into bad old habits where I did not tell anyone, and by anyone I'm including my mental health professionals, till like March of that year, how badly I was struggling. But outside of that, I was going to book events. I went to Y'all West again, which was so fun. I got to hang out with some of my best friends for the entire day. And I went to BookCon, which was the coolest experience ever. And I really did devote absolutely everything to booktube. It became everything to me, and it really was my savior. The book community was my savior during these very, very bad months for me. Then, as the summer of 2018 rolled around, I decided that it was time to take my mental health into my own hands. I started opening up to people about what I was dealing with, and I decided to start using the tools I had learned, and I decided to start actually utilizing my mental health professionals for the help I needed, and I am so much happier now. And now, on the eve of my 17th birthday, as I have just entered my senior year of high school, I am the happiest I have ever been in my entire life. I have the greatest friends in the world, online and in real life. I have books, I have the booktube community, and I have myself, which took me a really long time to realize. And at this point in my life, I am just so thankful for all the blessings I have, because I have a lot. I mean, obviously, as I've mentioned so many times in this video, there's booktube, there's the book community, which is my rock. There are my amazing supportive friends who I love with all of my heart. There's my family, who's the most supportive family in the entire world. But most importantly, there's myself, and I'm a pretty damn awesome person. And that's my story so far, and I'm so young that I know there's so much more to come, but that's what it is so far. So thank you all so much for watching and for supporting my journey thus far. Please give this a like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I love you all.